zone, down the field, and it is deflected, and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Over goes back to throw, men are coming late, looks right down the middle, there's Eddie Brown, he has it at the 35 to the 30, he may go, 10-5, touchdown!
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up. It is good!
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards.
And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20, touchdown! And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Chad Johnson's got it. Touchdown, Cincinnati.
Look at Chase go. Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found. Chase for the touchdown. Wow, Chase is on the case.
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Germaine Burton has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam. How about that?
Welcome in to Chatterbox Bengals Tuesday edition trade deadline special. Moved it up today because woke up this morning and the Bengals were active. I texted Craig. I said, oh boy, are we really doing this thing today? Let's move the show up to 4. Make sure we can be on top of everything. But here we are, 4:03, and the Khalil Herbert trade from about 8:30 this morning is still the only move the Bengals have made. Not necessarily as busy of a trade deadline as many people expected coming into this one. A lot of big names had been floated around. Obviously, that happens every trade deadline, and it seems to be underwhelming. But this one especially felt like there were a lot of big names on the table, and not many of them were moved, though teams addressed the issues we figured they were going to address for the most part. The Bengals loan addition running back Khalil Herbert from the Bears for a 7th-round pick. I'm Jacob Tissett, joined by Craig Sandlin. We're going to touch on the Bengals edition here. Hopefully, maybe, it's only 4:04. Something else may be coming in at some point soon. Probably not. But we'll let you know if it does. We'll talk about the Bengals' new addition, what it means for the rest of the season, touch on some of the other moves from around the league, and then get into our standard recap of the Raiders' win this past Sunday. Craig, how were you feeling this morning when you saw the Khalil Herbert news? I assume you were pretty excited, like all other Bengals fans, that they were at least active and on the phones. Did you think that was going to be the lone move today when it was made?
No, and I mean, I'm in Central Time Zone, so when I woke up, it literally had already happened. So, I went from literally waking up to the news and seeing that the Bengals had already made one move that many people thought they were going to make, and seeing so many rumors out there of interest in additional moves. And I think that really is ultimately one of the things that leads to what feels now like a little bit underwhelming, right? Mm-hmm. I think we woke up, we saw the Khalil Herbert move. We heard from Diana Rossini and others about how active the Bengals were on the phone, about making moves. It just didn't come to fruition. And for a team that has very blatant holes, it really does become a little bit of a disappointing trade deadline. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that moves can't still be made and that waiver wire moves can't be made and all of these other things, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the Bengals took a step closer to being a Super Bowl contender or even a playoff contender for that matter with only adding Khalil Herbert at the deadline.
That is the other thing, and you just mentioned it there, to keep an eye on around the trade deadline. A lot of times picks are traded for players, which means you have to free up roster spots. Bengals will certainly have an opportunity to improve this team still in the coming hours and days with guys that are released from other teams. And I know we obviously talk about how the Bengals have only made 2, now 3 trades in their franchise history in season. They do that a lot. picking off the waiver wire to improve in holes in their team. And there have been a few interesting releases around the league so far. One most notably, in my opinion, Andrew Booth, the former second-round pick corner out of Clemson, was released by the Cowboys, a guy that I really liked coming out of the draft. And the Bengals were interested in trading for a corner. At least that was reported earlier in this trade deadline cycle. So maybe something to keep an eye on as we progress. But since it is the only move that we had made, let's talk about Khalil Herbert. Let's get into it. Obviously not the sexiest trade to make for a team that was trying to bolster their roster and get back into the hunt to compete for a championship, but a trade that was necessary nonetheless. Zach Moss on IR now with a neck injury, going to be out for the foreseeable future. This is a trade that might have seemed like a luxury trade at some point this season. Certainly didn't think the Bengals needed a running back with Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Chase Brown had 27 carries this past weekend. He was the only running back to touch the ball. Trading for a running back was really, you didn't have a choice at this point. So going out and getting Khalil Herbert, who's a guy I really like. I think he's a pretty good player, a pretty exciting player. One of the better running backs I think you could get for that price on the market, just a 7th-round pick, which is exactly what I think the Bengals should be willing to give up for a running back that's basically a depth piece now. But I'm not entirely sure Khalil Herbert's not the best running back on this team. He was averaging about 5 yards per carry a few years ago when he was the lead back in 2022 for the Chicago Bears. He's still over 4 yards for his career, not getting much run so far this year with the addition of DeAndre Swift to Roschon Johnson in that backfield. But I think he's a guy that's going to add a lot to this backfield. Someone I was really, really excited about pending the Bengals making other moves. With him being the only move, it kind of stains it a little bit for me, but still, I think a really good addition for this team.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about this move that's interesting to me is that, I feel like Khalil Herbert is very similar to Chase Brown that the Bengals already have in terms of his explosiveness and elusiveness. The area that I felt like the Bengals really needed to address was specifically we saw with Travion Williams this past weekend with the pass blocking.
Yep.
And if we're being honest, Khalil Herbert does not address that issue. He has only had 2 pass blocking opportunities this year. Both of them came in the game against Indianapolis in week 3. Outside of that, he's had very limited opportunities, even in terms of seeing the field. That Indianapolis game was the game that he saw the most total snaps on, and he saw only 9 snaps. And this is a guy who, if you look over the last several years, was getting decent chunks of looks for the Bears, over 300 snaps each year over the last 3 years since coming out. And for that number to drop to only 27 total snaps this year is a little alarming. And I don't know that, obviously we know that the Bears are really high on Roschon Johnson, but I don't know that they've really upgraded in a way that makes sense to completely minimize Khalil Herbert's role in this offense. And so, look, at the end of the day, running back turned into a need when you found out that Zach Moss may not be available for the remainder of this season is what the word is now on the street. The struggle is that I don't know that he helps you in a way that really takes you to another level other than just avoiding over usage of Chase Brown. And maybe that's all they needed. Though. Maybe they feel really comfortable with Chase Brown and they feel like he gives them what they need, and they don't feel like they're going to need anything more than just a guy to come in and relieve a couple snaps here and there. But the fact still remains that the Bengals have been atrocious in short yardage situations, and I don't know that Khalil Herbert, gets you any better there. The Bengals have been horrendous in pass blocking in the backfield. Khalil Herbert doesn't improve you there. And then the other piece of it, again, that we've talked about is, the Bengals needed pass rush. The Bengals needed secondary help, and they didn't go out and get it. Khalil Herbert's career pass block grade via PFF is 60.1, which is slightly better than Chase Brown. But again, he's had very limited opportunities the first 3 years in his career. 61.5, 54.4, and 53.3 pass block grade. So it's not like he's been great in that realm. But nonetheless, the Bengals made a move. They reportedly called on many others and just weren't able to get a deal done. Frustrating nonetheless. But they add a piece that I think really was a necessity versus the other pieces that were maybe wants.
I think that's exactly what it comes back to here. A lot of people point to that trade and say, hey, the Bengals broke their mold this year, even though we're not happy. The Bengals broke their mold and still made a trade in season. I don't know that they did break their mold. They made a trade because they have one competent running back on their roster at this point. Travion Williams is not going to cut it. We saw that this week. He doesn't really provide you anything, much running or passing, or pass blocking, I should say. Chase Brown needed help in that backfield, and this is a trade you just had to make in order to field a football team for the next 9 weeks. So I don't really know that the Bengals really did anything different this year, even though it's going to go down in history as the third in-season trade of the last 52 years. Chase Brown can't be your only running back. I know he showed a lot with those touches this last week that maybe he is a bell cow back, but not having another option is not a sensible way to run an offense, especially at the running back position where injuries are so common. So it's a move that had to be made. It's a move that I think probably gets me more excited than almost any running back on the market. I don't. Obviously, you never know who's all on the market, but he's a guy that it was circled coming into the trade deadline that was going to get moved, and someone that I had said I would be excited if the Bengals went and got. The one thing that I think is exciting, I know you said that he's not necessarily a short down running back per se, but he has had success in some of those short yardage situations in his career. In 22 rushing attempts on 3rd and 4th down, and short in 3 yards or less, he's turned 16 of those into first downs. So some ability to fall forward and create some yardage in those bunched up situations. He's 5'9", 212 pounds. So certainly gives you a little bit more oomph down there in the trenches than Chase Brown gives you. So it's a nice piece to this team that the Bengals did not have, but certainly we were looking for some luxury trades this week, Craig. We were certainly looking to improve some positions where we have the guys to field a team, but they're certainly not top-level talent. We were hoping for improvements at edge rusher and corner, and maybe really anywhere else. I think everyone was kind of open to any kind of addition to improve this team, whether that be a wide receiver, or tackle depth, or a guard, or whatever position that we think we could improve. I don't think anyone would have turned their nose up at a move to try to improve this team, even if it didn't work. And it's a shame that the Bengals sat on their hands after making a trade this morning for a 7th-round pick and continued to hold on to the mid-round picks and 5th-round picks and stuff like that as if they are gold. And that's something I said this morning on Off the Bench before I knew that the Bengals were done. I said it's nice to see the Bengals not treating these late round picks like they're so valuable when you can't draft there. And then it seems like they turned around and decided that those things are very, very valuable. So they held on to them. Like,
I do think that that's one thing that's a little bit frustrating, though, is you look around the league and you look at some of the prices that guys went for. And, we talked about this on Sunday, I think. I mean, you would have loved to have seen the Bengals make some of the moves that other teams made, given the price tag of those other teams, right? Like, the Vikings go out and get Cam Robinson from Jacksonville, and Jacksonville basically got a 5th-round pick, and Minnesota got Cam Robinson in a conditional 7th. Like, those are the type of moves that, don't cost you a whole lot, and it's just, it's difficult to see other teams make the moves that you wish your team would make.
Right.
But, I don't want to downplay the Khalil Herbert addition. Like, I do think that this was a good move by the Bengals to add Khalil Herbert. And like you said, I think he was one of, if not the best running back that was available on the market. There were rumors early on about Alvin Kamara maybe being available. Realistically, the Bengals were never going to make a move for Alvin Kamara. Like, that just didn't make sense. So, there were guys moved that I wish the Bengals could have gotten. There were guys that were rumored to be available that I wish the Bengals could have gotten. The Bengals got a little bit better today, but they didn't get as much better as I would have liked them to have gotten.
Right, and I think that's the takeaway. And I think it might honestly be an easier pill for Bengals fans to swallow if they hadn't have made any move, or at least made Khalil Herbert at the buzzer or something like that, so we could hang our hat on it and say, well, at least they did something. Making it so early in the morning really got fans engaged on the rest of the day and thinking that other moves were going to be coming, because I never in a million years thought a running back would be a lone move. I thought going out to get a running back would be a move that you couple with other things to show that you're really focused on winning right now this year and making a push at the playoffs. But it is the only move they made because I guess it is the only need that they absolutely had to fill. Everything else would have been additional and on top. It seems like for the most part, the big name players or more impactful players that I wanted the Bengals to pick or at least or trade for or target didn't even get moved. A lot of the players that I had circled are still on the teams that they were on. I mean, all three players on our thumbnail today, I was certainly interested in coming to Cincinnati. That's Chase Young, Calais Campbell, and Calvin Ridley, three guys that I think would immediately improve this team. All three ended up staying exactly where they're at. Another guy that was talked about a lot by fans on Twitter and everywhere else was Azeez Ojulari, a guy who dominated the Bengals earlier this year in prime time. He ended up staying where he's at in New York. The price tag there was reported to be a 4th-round pick for him, and obviously no team willing to pony that up. So I think, again, this is a result of what most trade deadlines are, and it's getting your hopes up for players that aren't actually on the market. Remember a couple of weeks ago, maybe months ago at this point, we were all talking about bringing Jeffrey Simmons to Cincinnati and improving this defense with Jeffrey Simmons in the middle, giving a 1st-round pick and T. Higgins or whatever else kind of trade packages were thrown out by fans regarding Simmons coming from Tennessee to Cincinnati. Well, teams called about Jeffrey Simmons, and it was reported that they knew the answer on those calls before the phone was even hung up. So no intention of moving him. The Raiders, there was no bubbling of Max Crosby being moved from Las Vegas in terms of today during the trade deadline. So all those big-name guys that people had circled as the one piece that can turn this season all the way around, those guys are still on the teams that they were at. So don't let anyone tell you that people were making these big-time home run trades while the Bengals were sitting on their hands. That's not happening. But the Bengals absolutely could have improved their team in other ways and chose not to. A lot of these prices were very, very low for players that we had talked about coming to Cincinnati, that we have positions of need for, and the Bengals chose not to make those moves. I think it's something that is frustrating for everyone because it's another year, and a year where our backs are really against the wall, and these moves really would have helped. They asked Joe Burrow what he thought about the move during his press conference earlier today, and he said it absolutely is a boost to the locker room to feel the front office believe in you and interject something into the guys that are here, because he said maybe there are a couple holes, but we believe in the guys we have in our locker room, and that's been the sentiment that comes from everyone, and I think it feels a little different when a player says it versus a coach. When Zach Taylor said that, it got under my skin a little bit, but when Joe Burrow says that, that's absolutely what he should say, and I think he's definitely glad to have a little bit of confidence from the front office. I think no wonder, I mean, no one's going to say it to the media or anything like that, but I'm sure everyone would have liked a couple more moves, but the Bengals have the pieces to go out there and win games down this stretch. They just need them to play at a better level, and that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like we just said, like the positional upgrades that we wanted the Bengals to make were they were luxury moves, right? Like,
yep.
At the end of the day, on paper, now obviously we've seen how things have gone, but with the offense the way that it is and what we've seen out of the defense, this team is still good enough to make the playoffs. Now, are they good enough to make a Super Bowl run? I don't know about all that, but the team itself is good enough to make the playoffs. And I think the challenge is that, you know, we would have liked to see the front office try to make a move for the Super Bowl. Like, I think there's a question of, okay, well, were these moves to try to get you into the playoffs, or are these moves to try and get you to a Super Bowl? And I think we could have learned a lot from the deadline. And, you know, Nick Kirby and I talked about this in the Reds trade deadline special as well. Like, it takes two to tango. We recognize that. Right. Azeez Ojulari being a 4th-round asking price. Unless you have a pre-negotiated extension for Azeez Ojulari, I don't know that you're going to give up a 4th round to bring him in for the last 8 weeks of the season. I just don't know if that really makes that much sense. But with that being said, if you think you're a Super Bowl team or have the capability of being a Super Bowl team, then you should be doing whatever you can to try and improve the team. And so I think it, you know, again, knowing that it takes two to tango, it could tell you a little bit about where this front office truly believes this team is and can go. But it also could just tell you that, hey, we weren't able to get the deals done. We called on a lot of guys, and the prices were too high, or the team didn't want to deal with us for whatever reason, or whatever it may be. You know, like, I don't know. You know, one of the guys that we had circled on our list for sure was Marshawn Lattimore, right? So he lands with the Washington Commanders. The Commanders get Marshawn Lattimore in a 5th-round pick. They give up a 3rd round, a 4th round, and a 6th round. Is that a trade that you're making, Jacob? That exact trade?
Personally, no. I'm not giving up a third-round pick for Marshawn Lattimore.
Right. So that's the thing, right?
And that's the luxury the Commanders have. They have 9 draft picks this year. They have the ability to overpay in some of those markets. And that's an important thing to look at, because in the chat, people are saying, well, a guy that I wanted that did get moved is Marshawn Lattimore. Why didn't we make that trade? I would not have for that price.
Right. So that's the thing, right? I mean, you have to do a number of different kind of analyses on this, and was the player that you were interested actually available?
Right.
What was the asking price of that player, and what other teams were involved, right? So, Marshawn Lattimore moving within the NFC, maybe we had a chance at him, but if you call and they say, hey, we want a third, a fifth, and a sixth, maybe you're not biting on that. I don't know. We're not in the front office. I don't pretend to know all of the conversations that are going on. The one thing that has been mentioned before that I think is potentially a legitimate comment is that as much as the reports were out there about the Bengals being involved in all of these conversations, how much of that was legitimate and how much of that is just smoke screens, right? You look in our conference and you look in our division specifically, both the Steelers and the Ravens made moves today to get better and to compete for a Super Bowl. The Bengals did not. So for a team who, you guys talked about it on Off the Bench this morning, this team realistically may only have a shot at the 7th seed.
Right.
That may be the only spot that's really available in the AFC, and that may be the only spot that's competitive. Those other 2 teams are competing for potentially a 1 or a bye or, a home game, whatever it may be. That's probably a lot different than competing to just sneak into the playoffs. So I don't know. Look, like I said at the top, disappointing for sure. I woke up excited for today, but I did the same thing with the Reds trade deadline.
Yeah.
Earlier this year as well, and left a little underwhelmed at that trade deadline too. And so, I'm used to it at this point. Long story short, this is the 3rd time in 55 years that the Bengals have made any sort of in-season move to acquire a player. So I don't know why we would have expectations that they would have made multiple moves today.
Right. I think it's just because it was reported instantaneously with the Khalil Herbert move that they were going to make multiple moves by basically everyone.
Yeah. Everyone's saying they're not done. They're not done. They're not done.
Right. Straight down the line.
They were done.
They were done. And I think we really found out they were done when they posted a welcome to Cincinnati nice little edit for Khalil Herbert about 6 hours after the trade was made, with about an hour to go until the trade deadline. As soon as that tweet was sent, it was wrapped up. You knew they weren't gonna do anything else. But the Bengals didn't do a whole lot, but a lot of other teams did. And that's going to continue to affect the Bengals as we're fighting for the AFC playoff spot. LaShawna Thomas in the chat asks, who did the Ravens trade for? And that's obviously a big question as we're headed to Baltimore this week. The Ravens traded for Tre'Davious White today, really just before we hopped on the show. The Ravens had a 7th-round pick swap. They sent a 7th-round pick this year for Tre'Davious White and a 7th-round pick next year to the Los Angeles Rams. So Tre'Davious White, a 2019 All-Pro corner when he was with the Buffalo Bills, is headed to Baltimore, and who knows if he'll play this Thursday. I would certainly guess not. That's a very quick turnaround to get accustomed to the defense. It's a little different than a lot of other positions. If you're playing corner, you have to know a whole lot about what's going on the back end of that defense. So it would be a shock if he can play this Thursday, but certainly something that is interesting to watch as teams competing for playoff spots in the AFC and seeding in the AFC continue to add and improve their teams. A lot of sentiment in the chat that he's absolutely cooked and old and washed, and I think I agree. I don't think Tre'Davious White's an all-pro. I do think getting a player like that for free does show that you're at least committed to trying, and that's Baltimore throwing their hat in the ring. Did they try for other corners? Maybe. Who knows? But they didn't get them, and they were able to pick up Tre'Davious White at the end for free, roll the dice, and maybe get a solid player. Maybe not. I mean, they're not going to ask him to be their corner 1. he's going to be a rotational player for them and hopefully raise the floor of a secondary that's been pretty poor this year. So I think it's a really good move by Baltimore. It's one that I would have loved to see the Bengals make for sure, but that wasn't the only move Baltimore made today. Earlier in the trade deadline window, they traded for Deontay Johnson. It was a couple of picks were sent to Carolina for Johnson and a pick back to Baltimore, in which Baltimore ended up moving down about 10 spots total. So they got Johnson and Tre'Davious White, two relatively big-time names, moved at the deadline for next to nothing. And it's just another quote-unquote masterclass from Eric DeCosta. He's a great GM in Baltimore. It's a really well-run organization, and they continue to attack this window with Lamar Jackson really all go. And it's something I wish the Bengals would do a little bit more with their franchise quarterback.
Yeah, the Deontay Johnson move. Baltimore received the Deontay Johnson and a 6th-round pick this year. Carolina got a 5th-round pick. When you consider that the Ravens will be picking at the back end of the 5th round and the Panthers will be picking at the front end of the 6th round, really not much of a giveaway there.
Also, Deontay Johnson, unrestricted free agent. If he leaves, they might get a comp pick. So they'd actually gain draft value from that trade.
Yep. And the Tre'Davious White move, I believe what I saw was that Baltimore received Tre'Davious White in a 2026 7th, and Los Angeles got a 2025 7th. So literally just a 7th round pick swap. So, you know, there's been a lot of moves that seem free, to say the least. You know, I think one of the interesting pieces though too is that a lot of the guys that we had our eyes on were kind of inexpensive guys. I mean, you talk about Calais Campbell, he would have cost the Bengals like $600,000.
Right.
The Dolphins don't have a need to move $600,000 off of their payroll.
That's true.
Right? Like, if you're going to be moving a guy, it's probably going to be a guy that you can't afford or want to get that off your payroll. So, nonetheless, interesting move done there. We talk about within the division, the Steelers, they trade a 7th round pick for linebacker Preston Smith from the Green Bay Packers. They go out and they get Mike Williams for a 5th round pick. I mean, both the Ravens and the Steelers improving today, or during this trade deadline period, I guess, while the Bengals are standing flat-footed. Well,
Right.
maybe not flat-footed. I mean, they did get
not flat. They
Khalil
moved.
Herbert,
They moved. They shuffled their feet a little bit, at least early in the morning, and then went back to bed. So that's good. At least Duke got up and made something with his morning coffee before he took his nap. So that's good. I'm happy. But yeah, I think that's the thing that has a bunch of fans upset, is that the teams around them in the division were making moves, and not just in the division. The teams around in the wild card hunt were making moves as well. We've seen teams on both sides of the league, NFC and AFC, making different moves to try to bolster their ability to make the wild card. Obviously not today, but during the trade deadline, the Jets went out and got Devontae Adams to give themselves a better chance. We've already seen that move paying dividends for them as they're trying to claw their way back into the wild card hunt in the AFC. And the other side, obviously something that's been talked about as a big-time overpay today, but the Cowboys going out and getting a receiver with the injury to CeeDee Lamb. Jonathan Mingo sent from the Panthers to the Cowboys for... I can't be reading this right, Craig. So what was Mingo sent from the Panthers to the Cowboys for?
Oh, man. Jonathan Mingo and a 7th-round draft pick for a Dallas Cowboys 4th-round draft pick.
4th rounder for Jonathan Mingo. Man, what a head scratcher. And Jerry Jones really toyed their fans this morning, saying that they were going out to get a receiver that he's admired since his college days, a guy that they really liked coming into the draft. He was saying all this on Dallas local radio this morning, and then it's Jonathan Mingo for a 4th round pick, which is actually less than the Cowboys got back for Amari Cooper when they sent Cooper to Cleveland. So a real great all-in move for Jerry Jones as he continues his head-scratching season in terms of GM moves.
Yeah, Jonathan Mingo and his 12 catches for 121 yards on the year really going to take those Dallas Cowboys to the next level as Dak Prescott goes on the IR.
Yeah,
real good timing there.
Yeah, certainly an interesting one.
If I had to put you on the spot and say, okay, let's look at the rundown of all the moves that were made during this trade deadline period, what's the one move you wish the Bengals would have made that another team did make?
I think there's a distant one, and it's 6th round pick for edge rusher, and I'll let you pick which one. Josh Uche to Kansas City would have been fine by me, and then Baron Browning going from Denver to Arizona is another one that I absolutely would have loved the Bengals to make. I had Browning and Ojulari circled as my top 2 targets coming into yesterday, I guess, before Browning was moved, but coming in to this trade deadline period, just because they're 2 guys who are going to be free agents at the end of this season, going into their second contracts after their rookie contracts run out. That's the kind of guy the Bengals are going to attack in free agency anyway. I would have loved to have given up a late round pick that we don't ever benefit from anyway for getting an extra 8-week, 9-week runway to extend these guys if they're able to play at a high level in Cincinnati. I would have loved Uche or Baron Browning that was sent to the Cardinals. I think both of those guys would have been great. Obviously, the one that everyone really wanted was Azeez Ojulari, and he wasn't moved from the Giants. But an edge rusher would have been a great piece for us. Down the stretch, at the end, it was rumored that the Bengals were honed in on adding an interior D lineman. Diana Rossini reported that with about a half hour to go until the trade deadline. So maybe they were trying to get something done at the end and just were unable. No clue who that might have been, but certainly it was nice to hear that the Bengals were at least trying, if you want to believe that. I think that's something you can take some solace in if you do choose to believe that they were actually trying. Plenty of people are saying that they're just putting that out there with no intention to make trades, just to make fans happy, and maybe. I'm going to choose to believe that my organization's not a bunch of slimeball liars and they're maybe a little bit above board.
Maybe. Just maybe. No, I mean, I think I like that answer. Josh Uche was probably the one for me that stood out that I thought the Bengals probably could have or should have done. I mean, that's a guy who on the year has a 72.7 PFF grade on the pass rush. I mean, if you're talking about the one area of need on this defense, or the biggest area of need on this defense, I thought that was the area. And when Josh Uche went from the Patriots to the Chiefs, I instantly got upset. I think Baron Browning also brings good pass rush ability. I just felt like Josh Uche with his speed brought a little bit more. He was the one that stood out to me as a move I wish the Bengals would have made, especially when you're talking about only giving up a 6th round pick to make it happen. Well, look, let's any final thoughts around the trade deadline? There was one more trade that got reported right at or after the deadline. The San Francisco 49ers go out and trade for defensive tackle Khalil Davis from the Houston Texans. Again, a move that maybe would have made sense if the Bengals found out that Calais Campbell wasn't going to be available, or one of the other D tackles that they were looking at wasn't available. A rotational piece certainly wasn't going to come in and be a stud, but when you're talking about a defense who, quite frankly, lacks a little bit of depth when it comes to pass rush specifically, adding another body may have been beneficial. But any other final thoughts on trade deadline before we recap?
I wish I had more thoughts, Craig. I really do. And for all the people that were expecting a big, long, bulky trade deadline special, don't blame us. Blame the Bengals. You can only talk about Khalil Herbert for so long. A guy I am excited to have in Cincinnati. A guy I really wanted to pick up this trade deadline. A lot of other moves made around the league. A lot of other teams getting better. Bengals add a backup running back. Maybe a starter. We'll see what happens. But the lone move is Khalil Herbert. And we will move into our standard Tuesday programming. The key plays from this last weekend's game against the Las Vegas Raiders. A big-time win for the Bengals, of 41-24 win over the Raiders. The first home win for the Bengals this season, scoring 40 points again. Sure does feel good. After the last 3 weeks of lackluster offense against really not the best teams. The Eagles certainly better on paper, but that defense has allowed a lot of points at different times this year. The Bengals unable to capitalize in that one, as with the 2 wins before that. So nice to see them get back on track in the defense, allowing only 17 points because of the pick 6 from Joe Burrow getting to that 24. Only allowing 17 points. That's a recipe for success in the NFL, and something I was very, very excited to see. But it wouldn't be Chatterbox Bengals if we took a win and broke down positive plays. So there's a few positive plays in here, but Craig took the liberty of pulling almost exclusively negative plays. So we're going to go ahead and talk about the shortcomings of the Bengals in this week's game against the Raiders, though they were able to win. That's what it is important to talk about is what to improve, because they did play the Raiders, and getting a win against the Raiders doesn't tell you a whole lot, because you got to go play a really, really good team on a short week this week in Baltimore, which we will preview for a little bit right at the end of this show on Thursday night. But before we get into that, key plays from this week's game. Craig, we're going to start with the O-line and Cordell Volson.
Yeah, I mean, look, this interior offensive line has been a struggle all year, but you can see on this play here, Cordell Volson calling out a blitz package. He's pointing to number 5 here, saying number 5 is coming. It's a pass block. He's dropping back. His eyes are immediately to the right. The guy he thinks is blitzing is right ahead of him. His eyes immediately move to the right. And what happens is Spillane is able to go right by him, completely untouched, and bring down the pressure on Joe Burrow, force the incomplete pass. And this was the play that really, in my opinion, Jacob, really ticked off Joe Burrow. I think this
100%.
was the play that sent him over the edge in terms of his level of anger. And whether it was the fact that he didn't override Cordell Volson or just the misread or whatever it may have been, that was the play that absolutely sent Joe Burrow, and he got a similar look out of him as you did back when he was with LSU when he got knocked out, So, look, at the end of the day, this isn't the first time you're going to see this isn't the last time you're going to see an interior offensive lineman for this Bengals team blocking nobody. But just an absolutely frustrating scenario here where Robert Spillane just goes completely unblocked. And again, not only with Cordell Volson, but what is Travion Williams doing?
That's
here
exactly
as well?
what I wanted to touch on there.
Just a all around, complete misassignments over and over again.
Cordell Volson up, no wonder Joe Burrow's upset. Volson pointing out a blitz and then just deciding to not block a blitzer. Obviously not the guy he pointed to. He pointed to number 5, but how hard is it to just look? 41's right there. Block the guy. Well, you've done enough Cordell Volson breakdown here. He's gotten his due. He's certainly in the wrong, but now turn your eyes to Travion Williams, chat. 32, the running back in the backfield. What would you do if a linebacker was coming untouched to your quarterback on a pass rush here on third down when you're the pass blocking running back? Would you block that linebacker, or would you go help chip on the edge rusher who's already taken care of? I personally would probably block the blitzing linebacker. Trey decided not to and go chip on the edge rusher. A very, very frustrating play for a running back. And I think one of the plays that made the Bengals go out and get Khalil Herbert today. I think if Travion Williams would have played a lot better this weekend, both in pass pro and, he didn't have any touches, but if he was able to show anything in practice to get himself some touches, I think the Bengals would have done what they always do this trade deadline, which is sit on their hands and do absolutely nothing. But with how bad he looked in his limited action, the Bengals really had no choice but to go get a second running back with Zach Moss out for the rest of the year and Travion Williams, the only other active running back on the roster.
Yeah, I don't think we put it in there, but the other play that's all over social media with Travion Williams this week is him getting absolutely trucked on a blitz.
Destroyed.
I don't remember who was. Yeah, I don't remember who was blitzing. I think it was. Yeah, I don't remember who was blitzing by the Raiders. I don't know if you remember it off the top of your head. I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was Trayvon Moehrig. Number 7, the safety. I think he was coming on a safety blitz, and he literally comes up the middle, and Travion Williams steps up to block him, and Moehrig literally just runs right through him, just knocks him on his butt. Similar to a clip we showed earlier this year of the Bengals when I don't remember who it was. It might have been Alex Cappa, just got knocked on his butt on a play too. Seems to be a similar theme, right? This Bengals blocking,
which is not great.
Their butt, but
you don't want to be laying on your
ideal.
butt if you're supposed to be blocking a defender. That's certainly not the way to operate, especially in the NFL.
Yeah, not ideal, but like I said, that wasn't the last time we were going to show an interior offensive lineman blocking nobody, Jacob.
Here you go. Alex Cappa, welcome to the party. Well, I guess not, because he didn't want to join the party. He didn't even want to hit anybody. Usually, if you're playing offensive line, you block somebody. Well, here, take a chance to look at Alex Cappa. Yeah, right guard here, Alex Cappa, decides that he, after getting off of number 69 there, when Mims takes over, is just going to go for a little stroll. Doesn't even want to hit Rob Spillane. Let's Spillane get a hand on Chase Brown there. This angle is just hilarious to me. This angle is just hilarious to me. As Cappa walks from the 50 to the 45, all the way near the 40, without blocking a single soul, Craig. Not one person. Just crazy for a guy that was supposed to be brought in to turn this offensive line around. He's been a good Bengal in his time here. Beginning of the season, it was looking like it was going to be his best year in stripes, but not over the last few weeks.
No, I mean, look, I feel a little bad for this, but like, thank God for Chase Brown and his elusiveness, because that should have been, a gain of maybe 2 or 3, and he was able to turn it into a decent gain here.
He did that a couple times
picks
this
up
week.
Spillane, if Cappa picks up Spillane there and he seals the edge, look at that lane that Chase Brown would have had to be able to make that play.
Oh yeah.
If he picks up Spillane there and he's blocking, Brown might house that.
Certainly.
And instead he has to cut back and slow down his route, and manages to pick up a healthy, I think it was 9 on this play. But imagine what it could have been if he actually had some blocking in front of him, and that's solely on Alex Cappa.
Right.
And then this one here is a similar idea, where Alex Cappa getting to the second level is just non-existent. Like in this one here, you can see, so first of all, if you take it back like a second, you can see like nobody, right? And this is Max Crosby running a stunt. So maybe he thinks he's got to help on Max Crosby, but he's got to know where the run is going. And so if he knows that this run is coming behind him up the butt, like he's got to get to that second level, and he's got to go man on man with number 5 there and take him out. And that's going to leave Spillane, obviously, but you got Karras coming up, and he theoretically should take care of Spillane. And then once again, you would have this giant gash to be able to go with a big pickup. But instead, he helps on Max Crosby, leaves number 5 completely unguarded, and allows the Raiders cornerback to come in and crash and affect the angle of Chase Brown. Rather than him being able to take that to the right, he has to force it back up to the left, and ends up with only a gain of, I say only a gain of 21 instead of what could have been a house call.
It's another example of Chase Brown overcoming poor blocking. I mean, this is a chance for, if you get your blocks here, it's another house call. This is 2 for 2 with guards, our 2 starting guards having separate packages of them blowing house calls for your running back. That's not exactly a great place to be, especially when you're a team that already struggles to run the football. You have to be able to hit when the opportunities do present themselves, and they have been, and the offensive line is just not succeeding. It's very, very frustrating, and it's an issue that continues to be a problem in Cincinnati. It's something that's been a problem for a while now. I mean, how long have we talked about Cordell Volson as the weak link of that offensive line, basically since he's been here? And now Alex Cappa, as he gets older, is becoming more and more of a problem himself. It's a shame, because when we brought Cappa in from Tampa Bay, he really did his job. He made this team a lot better up front. He was the veteran presence that we needed to overhaul this offensive line, or at least start it going that way. Him and Ted Karras were the first 2 brought in to change that offensive line after the abysmal Super Bowl and playoff run performance by Trey Hopkins and company. But they did their job, and now as they're aging, both guys have begun to struggle this year. Volson has really always struggled. There's not much to blame new there with him. But Cappa, seeing this come to fruition with him as he is getting older, it really is a shame, just because of what he used to be able to be, especially in Cincinnati, but more so in Tampa Bay, because he really was one of the best guards in all of football when he was in Tampa Bay, and now we're seeing him with a complete inability to even get to the second level, which is very, very frustrating. I think that he's probably a cut candidate after this year to save some money if the Bengals are able to bolster the offensive line, whether in the draft or in free agency, with some younger, maybe more athletic pieces. We could be seeing 2 new guards, and the reason why that's something that people are talking about is because of what we just showed, missing pretty textbook assignments.
Yeah. In terms of run block, Alex Cappa this year, 55.1 PFF grade, 89th out of 113 guards in the NFL. Just not good enough, not going to get the job done. And, he's been okay. If we're being honest, he's been okay in the pass block. 5 of the 9 games, he's had a PFF grade above 66 in the pass block game, but he's only had 2 games above a 59 PFF grade in the run block game. And that's been a real struggle for him. And if you're going to run the ball 30 times like the Bengals did this past weekend, you can't afford to have an interior guard with a 49.5 run block rate. Like, it just isn't going to get the job done. And on plays like that, it's the difference between picking up 21 and picking up a touchdown. Now, the Bengals were good enough this weekend to overcome it. But again, the challenge becomes when you go and you play the Ravens this week, you can't afford those things. Like, the Ravens are too good to have guys completely unblocked by the interior line on blitzes. They're too good for you to not pick up their linebackers at the second level on run plays. Like, their linebackers are extremely good. They're very quick. And if this interior offensive line can't get to that second level, Chase Brown, Khalil Herbert, whoever you put back there is going to struggle to pick up yards in the run game.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. And those guys just simply have to be better. Sticking on the offensive side of the ball, the play that really marred a next to perfect game by Joe Burrow, a pick six on a play that the Bengals ran seemingly just a time too many, Craig. It was incredibly predictable, something that they had been running all day, the Jamar Chase behind the line of scrimmage, little swing pass, and this time it was just picked off and taken to the house. Really a frustrating play, and something we've actually seen this corner do before. It's the same exact play that Jones made against the Chargers in prime time a year ago. A one-handed pickoff that time. This time he had to use two hands. At least we're making it a little bit harder on him, but still something that he saw coming a mile away. This one is tough to say because Joe Burrow really doesn't have another option here. He's throwing this ball to Jamar Chase all day long. This is pretty quick. Bang, bang, and dump this ball out to Jamar Chase. There's no other routes even being ran, so it's not like he could make a different decision. The one thing that I do want to focus on here just for a second is Andrei Iosivas. Our favorite here on Chatterbox Bengals is Andrei Iosivas, and there he is right at the bottom of the numbers at the 35-yard line, lined up right across from Jones, the eventual pick sixer. You would like to get your hands on the corner, at least a little bit, maybe divert him from that route. Iosivas decides not to, takes an outside release on a swing pass. Jones jumps the route, untouched, takes it to the house, 30 yards. Iosivas tries to track him down to atone for his mistakes, but unable to, and it's a touchdown for the Raiders. Incredibly frustrating, and I think the main thing, you could toss blame around Iosivas, Burrow, whoever you want to blame here. I think the main person to blame is that we were running this play 5-6 times a game, and it's incredibly predictable, and the defense just knew it was coming.
Yeah, I think that one of the common themes here is that without T. Higgins to give that defense any sort of threat other places, Jamar Chase becomes the focus, and people can oversell on him. And I think, like we talked about on Sunday, when T. Higgins is not in the game, the only way that the Bengals are able to get the ball into Jamar Chase's hands is on these short passes and behind the line of scrimmage passes. They haven't been able to get him open out deep in the field because defenses are able to key on him. Now, you mentioned Andrei Iosivas here. Like, again, I think there's probably a lot that goes into this play, and I don't want to say one thing or another, but whether you're going to get hands on Jack Jones there, at the bare minimum, what you can't do is release to the outside and give him a free inside route to pick that ball up, right? Like, at the bare minimum, you have to release in to try and cut him off there and make him go a long way around you to get to Jamar Chase. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, the Raiders were showing a zone look here. Andrei Iosivas, Joe Burrow alike, they probably saw that zone look. They expected Jack Jones to drop back into coverage and that they would have Jamar Chase wide open. But the truth of the matter is, Andrei Iosivas has a job to do. And when you have press coverage like that, what you can't do is release to the outside on a route that is going to open up your wide receiver and your quarterback to be immediately picked off. And like you mentioned, Jack Jones has shown this before. I think he actually did it twice last year, if I'm remembering correctly. And he's known to jump routes. Like, that's just what he does. And when you're running the same play 6 times, maybe you're given slightly different looks, but when you're running Jamar Chase screen plays 6 times, you're just not going to get the job done. And when you look at the next gen stats route tree for Jamar Chase this week, I don't know if you looked at it at all. It's not pretty. Like, if we're being honest, like, when T. Higgins is not in the game, the Bengals just aren't creative in terms of getting Jamar Chase the ball. Like,
right.
His route tree this week, and again, you know, what do you have? 9 catches for 54 yards. Or am I thinking of the week before? Might be thinking of the week before.
No, you're right.
Like,
oh no, that is.
Was that right? It was the week before. But what amazes me every single week with Jamar Chase is just the lack of creativity in terms of getting him open when T. Higgins isn't in the game. Like, I get that it's one thing to have that kind of threat on the outside with T. Higgins and the jump ball, and we talk about Andre Yoshivas getting a number of like deep balls that were jump balls, basically, that T. Higgins probably would have brought in. Mm-hmm. But so far this year, Jamar Chase has 121 routes with T. Higgins in the game and 164 without. Yeah. In those 161 routes with T. Higgins in the game, he's averaging 3.12 yards per route, 10.7 air yards per target, and a 17.6% deep target percentage. With T. Higgins out of the game, that 3.12 yards per route drops to 1.3. The 10.7 air yards per target drops to 5.5. The deep target rate from 17.6% drops down to 8.3. Like, it just not good enough. And whether that falls on Lou, on Zach, whether that falls on, I think
this is one thing that Jamar, definitely does not fall on Lou.
probably cannot blame Lou on this one. But it just, there's just continual inability to capitalize on what could or should be a top 3 wide receiver in the league without a full arsenal of weapons. It's just not good enough, and really frustrating to look at kind of the lack of creativity that happens with Jamar Chase specifically.
Absolutely, because we talk about it time and time again. Every time T. Higgins out is how he's not able to perform to that top level without Higgins in the lineup. And we see the top receivers for plenty of other teams able to put up the same great numbers when their number 2 is not playing at a high level or not playing at all. And that's just not the case in Cincinnati. And everyone likes to blame Zach Taylor. I've been on that boat as well. But at some point, I think we're going to have to start looking in Jamar Chase's direction as well. If all these other guys are able to beat double coverage, triple coverage, whatever we're being talked about here, it's not just happening to Jamar. If he's getting doubled every play, he's not the only receiver in the NFL getting doubled every play when the number 2's out. How many times have we seen when Jordan Addison's been out, Justin Jefferson put up 150-plus yards, 2 touchdowns, whatever it is? Until this week, Jordan Addison had only about 200 yards on the season, and Justin Jefferson had been putting up gaudy numbers. That guy had been almost nowhere to be seen this year, and it didn't matter for Jefferson's success because Jefferson is a true number 1. I'm certainly not saying Jamar isn't. I still think Jamar is a top 2 or 3 receiver in the league. I'll never change my opinion on that as long as he keeps producing more often than not, and he has this year. He's still comfortably in the top 5 of receiving yards on the season, and he's up there for touchdowns as well. He's a guy who's absolutely in the upper echelon of receivers in this league, but he needs to take a step and be able to produce a little bit without someone else next to him. I think at some point it's not just the scheme and coaches. It does fall a little bit on Jamar and how he needs to be better. I do think some of that goes to the lack of receivers without T. Higgins. I think when you lose your number 2, not a lot of teams are dropping all the way down to the Andre Yoshivas, Trenton Irwin, Kendrick Pryor wide receiver room that we were running out there this week. That is not a standard 2, 3, and 4 wide receiver after losing a guy like T. Higgins. The Bengals certainly need to make something to address that wide receiver position in this offseason, especially with T. Higgins leaving. You're going to have to address wide receiver 2 as well. I think the Bengals are going to have to do a lot on the offensive side of the ball, which is very frustrating to say, with a lot of holes on defense as well. I know everyone's saying at this deadline only making 1 move for a running back and not bolstering the defense, very frustrating. Had to make a move for a running back. We don't have enough that are healthy. This offseason, everyone's going to say the defense was the problem this year. Why are we using premium picks and spending a lot of money in free agency on the offense? Have to. We don't have wide receivers on the roster if T. Higgins leaves. It's a tough spot to be in, and it's where the Bengals are right now. And not to pile on Yoshi, because this one certainly is not his fault, but another Yoshi play lined up for you guys here, and it's Max Crosby doing Max Crosby things, but I don't know how much I'm willing to credit Max Crosby here, because he was one-on-one blocked by Andre Yoshivas. Right there on the left side of your screen, you see Crosby run untouched across the screen to tackle Chase Brown in the backfield. Just a crazy, crazy play design here to have Andre Yoshivas try to block Max Crosby one-on-one. No help from Amarius Mims, not even a consideration to go out there and bump Crosby on his way down to the defensive tackle. And Yoshivas is tasked with getting all the way across one of the best edge rusher in football's face while he's trying to flow towards the run action. Very clear run action the other way, I might add. This gave Yoshivas no chance. I think Zach Taylor might have called this one just because he wanted to give us something to talk about here on Tuesday night, because I don't know why else you would have Yoshivas one-on-one with Max Crosby. Just an abysmal play design and one that really had no chance of ever working.
Yeah, but it's a similar story over and over again. Like, we've had the same exact play multiple times now, and it just I don't understand it. And I want to read this tweet from Big Willie Anderson. I don't know if you saw it or not. I will do my best to edit it for YouTube, but he said, "Silly offensive coordinators across the league, I'm officially offering my services. We can start an inaugural position. I'll be the quote, that ish ain't gonna work, coach. When I see you call a play with a backup tackle or a tight end on the NFL's best pass rusher like my guy Trey Hendrickson, I'll be in your meeting room and on the sideline in your ear saying, that ish ain't gonna work, coach. I'm serious. It's an epidemic. If y'all coaches think ex-players can't coach a position, I can at least be that coach. Raiders should have hired me today." Well, I hate to break it to you, Big Willie. The Bengals needed you too, because I tell you what, if anybody was in the room when that play got drawn up thinking, hey, let's leave Andre Yoshivas one-on-one with Max Crosby. Right. Oh, and let's line him up 3 yards outside of Max Crosby and expect him to get across that play. That ish ain't gonna work, coach. Like, no,
it is not.
Never gonna work. So, shout out to Big Willie. Deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, and definitely appreciate his comment on that one, because there are many times where I just question some of these calls and some of these play designs, both offensively and defensively.
Yeah, no question about it. But I think that's enough negativity for now. Let's move into a little bit of positivity as we go into talking about a recap of this game after the last couple of bit of plays. And here, one of the most fun plays, Mike Gesicki, touchdown.
Yeah, before we go, actually start this over. But
it's getting restarted. It started.
You're good. One of the things that I noticed when I was watching this film that I didn't notice live, I don't know if you caught this or not. This appears to be a hot route call by Joe Burrow. You can see him do the dagger with his right hand before this play starts. I think he's literally calling for the dagger with Mike Gesicki there. You can see him do it right there.
Yep.
Where it's a hot read here, and he knows that, hey, we've got this screen call, but I think we can beat it and go ahead and roll it, and obviously it works out for them.
Yeah, great play here by Burrow, and that's exactly goes back to the point you said there with the hot route. Knew exactly what he wanted there and really thought about nothing else other than getting that ball to Gesicki. Such a quick release here to the wide open tight end after looking at the screen. I mean, Gesicki could not have had more space and able to get away from the safety and score the touchdown there. Burrow, hot route here. We've talked a lot about different audibles he's made this year, maybe good, some bad. It's spent a lot of time on all the Chatterbox shows talking about such audibles. Here, a hot route that certainly did work. Gesicki wide open, perfect read of the defense, and a good screen sell by Jamar Chase to run that little out there pretty quickly and really get a burst there off the line to have the DBs by it. Jack Jones flying to the screen again. Obviously, maybe he could have seen that was going to be a problem at some point in this game, but Gesicki gets right behind the DBs, wide open. Really, as soon as he crosses the 40, you knew that was going to be a touchdown before he even caught the ball, able to get in the end zone and extend the Bengals lead. A great play by Joe Burrow to find Gesicki, who had 2 touchdowns on the day. The other one, not necessarily a Mike Gesicki highlight. It would be more of a Joe Burrow highlight, but another phenomenal play. And Gesicki has continued to be a phenomenal addition to this team in games without T. Higgins. He's really emerged as the wide receiver, too, in those such games, and it leaves me scratching my head. I know I said it on Sunday in the postgame show. where does he go when T. Higgins comes back? I know he goes down to the third read, which obviously means that he would disappear a little bit, but not to the degree that he has. He's been so productive when he's been that second option in this offense. I would love to see him more when T. Higgins gets back, but some bad news along that front. Jamar Chase seemingly slipped up today in his press conference, hinting at T. Higgins being out this week against the Ravens. So not a great sign there. Hopefully Germaine Burton can make it to all his walkthroughs and maybe help the offense this week with T. Higgins out. But if not, expect another Mike Gesicki show this week in Baltimore if number 5's unable to go. Switching back to the defensive side momentarily here, Mike Hilton. I don't think it gets talked about enough how good he's been since he got to Cincinnati. Brought in from Pittsburgh, slot corner, really a niche position, and he's played it at an elite level ever since he put the stripes on. Just a phenomenal player. And I was actually talking about this earlier this week with Reed Mouse, and we both agreed that I feel like the big plays Mike Hilton makes stick out so much more because they're always in open space. He's always flying under blocks and blowing up screens, or blitzing and sacking the quarterback as soon as he gets the shotgun snap, or the tipped interception against Tennessee in the Super Bowl playoff run. All the big plays that Mike Hilton makes seemingly stick out wide open space. If he gets beat, it's gonna be 6 type of plays, and he just continues to make them. Really has been such a great addition to the Bengals, nearing the end probably of his time in Cincinnati, and important we give him his due while he's here.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why they stick out is because he always makes them.
Right.
But he also never makes mistakes. Like, the only time you hear Mike Hilton's name is when he makes plays like the plays we're about to watch. You never hear, oh, Mike Hilton blown coverage. Oh, Mike Hilton missed tackle. Oh, Mike Hilton whatever. Like, he is always making the play. So far this year, Mike Hilton, only 3 missed tackles on the year. He has a 91.2 run defense PFF grade, number 1 amongst all cornerbacks in the NFL. I mean, he's a legitimate weapon for this defense, and he just shows it. He flies to the ball. He makes the tackle one-on-one. He doesn't need a lot of help. I mean, he comes out of nowhere a lot of times when we're watching these film, and like, you don't even think that he's in the play. This one is one of the ones where, like, you know, the ball gets handed off and he just attacks the hole, and he's able to take down not Josh Jacobs. He's able to take down
Amir Abdullah,
the running back 101. I couldn't remember if it was Amir Abdullah or whoever, but like, he just every time, and even that one there, like, he snakes his way through the offensive line. Like, he just finds a way to make a play every single time. And it just, I don't think we've given him any sort of real love on this show.
We haven't.
And as I was watching the film, that was a name that kept sticking out to me as, oh, wow, that was a nice play. And I was like, you know what? Let's give Mike Hilton some love this week. He deserves it.
I love that.
You know, I definitely think that he's done more than an exceptional job. I think he's done a really good job, and been an unbelievable asset when we're talking about a defense overall that's really struggled against the run. It's nice to know that at least on the outside, you have a cornerback you can rely on. Now all it takes is, all right, let's get this interior defensive line and these linebackers tackling a little bit better, and you could really have a pretty good run defense. And Mike Hilton has been really good for a number of years, and I just don't think he gets the due that he deserves. And so wanted to put that together for him.
It's good stuff. And he's one of the guys I think Bengals fans really do appreciate. And I think he's one of the guys that you really hang your hat on as a Bengals fan, that you know every single Sunday he's going to go and give it everything he has. You never have to worry about anything along those lines with him. And he's a guy that the rest of the league doesn't really enjoy, or appreciate, I should say, doesn't really appreciate as much as those of us here that watch most, if not all, of the Bengals games every single year. We know exactly what he does on a week-in, week-out basis, how consistent he is, how many big plays he is able to make. And I think that's why fans always kind of attach themselves to those kind of players, is because you feel like you have to defend them a little bit. No one respects Mike Hilton in the cornerback conversation, at least at a national level. And I very firmly believe he's one of, if not the best slot corners in all of football. He's unbelievable at his job. It's a very, very hard position to play. It's one he does very well, especially with the new age NFL of moving your elite receivers around. We're seeing the number one receiver on teams continue to be played in the flex more and more year by year. Having Mike Hilton at that position takes so much pressure off this defense. He has been nothing but great since he got to Cincinnati, and I'm just so glad he's here and has been here for so long, playing at such a high level. Another guy who's been playing at such a high level, and I know you said we hadn't given Mike Hilton a lot of respect, so you wanted to give him some there. This is a guy who we have given a lot of respect to. We started off last week because we thought that maybe we hadn't talked about him enough, but if he's going to do what he did this week, we're going to talk about him every week. Obviously, I'm talking about Trey Hendrickson. Trey Hendrickson was unbelievable this past weekend. 4 sacks, a career high for him. Not just a Bengals high, a career high going all the way back to his time in New Orleans. He was around the quarterback all day long. Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder, it didn't matter. Trey Hendrickson was eating your lunch. He was getting the job done all day, and it's just another thing that proves maybe the Bengals are going to have to break their mold. This is a guy who asked for an extension this offseason, an aging player, and he continues to play at a really high level. You have to think about extending this guy at some point because he is so clearly the best player on this defense and one of the best edge rushers in all of football. He's been absolutely incredible, and it was a career best game on Sunday. That is absolutely my favorite play that he had this weekend right there. We're actually going to go ahead and run it back, just putting Thayer Mumford in the turf right after this one. Unbelievable, a strip sack. He's a really, really good player, a special player, and one I'm really glad is rushing the passer in Cincinnati. I'd love to get him some help at some point.
Yeah, I mean, of the 10 pressures that he had this past weekend, 7 of them were in under 2.5 seconds. I mean, the speed, the power, I mean, just unbelievable skill set for Trey Hendrickson, and continues to show his value. And quite frankly, you know, now that the Bengals didn't make any sort of move at the trade deadline, it makes you wonder, you know, can we go out and extend Trey Hendrickson? I mean, if we're not going to have a Max Crosby type contract on our hands where we have to worry about that, like, you've got your own Max Crosby here with Trey Hendrickson, and he's shown week after week that he can be the heart and soul of this defense. And you know, he's been really, really good. And this past weekend, I mean, it's just hard to believe, but a 95.9 overall PFF grade for the game is crazy. And like you said, just, you know, putting guys on their butts, going right by guys. He can do it in so many different ways, and really affects the game so many different ways that, you know, even when he's not getting sacks, he's forcing the quarterback into other guys' arms, and, you know, just forcing incompletions and doing so many different things that affect the game that sometimes don't even show up on the chart.
And obviously, we all know how good Trey Hendrickson is. We knew how good he was coming into this season, but he really has just taken it to a completely different level this season. He has been unbelievable. The NFL sack leader now with 11. He is playing on a different level from really everyone else. And I've always said that he has no shot of winning a Defensive Player of the Year because I think that award is mostly name value and not statistics. But if he keeps this up all season long and is putting up 20-plus sacks potentially at the end of this season, and the Bengals are putting together the winning streak necessary in order to sneak into the playoffs, we're all focused on Joe Burrow's numbers and how they relate to the MVP conversation. And if the Bengals are able to rip off this 7 of 9 that he talked about last week, one already in the back pocket, could he get into that MVP conversation? I absolutely think so. In that case, another one I think we should be talking about is Trey Hendrickson. If the Bengals are playing at a high level and winning games against playoff teams, it's going to be because he's putting up insane numbers rushing the passer, because as we know now, as the trade deadline passed earlier this afternoon, this Bengals defense is what it is for the rest of the season. Barring maybe some waiver wire pickups or free agency ads after cuts follow the trades and activating players and stuff along those lines, maybe some marginal additions, but for for the most part, this defense is going to be what it is. Hopefully the young guys can play at a higher level and raise the floor of it, but it's going to come down to how good can Trey Hendrickson be. And so far, he's been otherworldly, and hopefully he can keep that up as the season progresses. It was a day of career highs for the Bengals this last week. It was a dominant win, 41-24, one of those Raiders scores coming off a pick six that we just showed from Joe Burrow on a swing pass to Jamar Chase. So the defense only allowing 17, really a great showing for them. A blip on the radar with that Eagles game, really the only elite offense that they've played in this stretch. But they have put together a pretty big chunk here of mostly good defensive games. It seems like, at least against the bottom of the league, they're able to shut down those quarterbacks and offenses, which, hey, I'll take it. I'm not nearly as upset about this win as Joe Burrow was. He wasn't happy at all, and I'll certainly take the wins against whoever, whenever they will come at this point in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I at the end of the day, though, Jacob, I mean, it's nice to get a dominant win, and it's nice for the defense to do what they're supposed to do. We've got to get a win on Thursday,
100%.
But it, I think part of it is confidence, and part of it is just knowing that you can go out and take care of business when you have to. And there's a number of games still on the schedule that are games that the Bengals should absolutely take advantage of and win fairly easily. There's going to be plenty of games on this schedule that are going to be challenges, and we recognize that. But there's also a number of games that we can't afford slip-ups. And I think Bengals of old may have slipped up in a game like this one, where they have the Raiders on a Sunday and then the Ravens on a Thursday night. Would have been really easy to overlook these Raiders and go straight to the Ravens game. And, the fact that they were able to stay focused and get the job done goes a long way. And, I thought that there were some interesting pieces from the press conference today, and one of them was, Joe Burrow saying that, it felt like the team was trying to get better by making a move. And so, you get off a week where you go out and you show out and put on a show on offense and put up 41 points, and then you go out and you add another offensive weapon in Khalil Herbert. And there's no reason that Joe Burrow's comment from Sunday, where he said, I expect to score on every single drive, shouldn't be the case. I mean, I hate to say it, but every single drive, this Bengals team should be putting points on the board. And there's very few reasons why they shouldn't, and certainly there's late game situations where maybe you don't want to put points on the board, or maybe they get too conservative or whatever, and we'll address those when they happen. But for the most part, this team is capable of scoring on every single drive. And, I think from an offensive perspective, there's no question there. The question only remains is, what is this defense able to do? And obviously they only gave up 17 points this weekend, 7 of which on the opening drive, 7 of which on the last drive. And, you can only take so much from that. Let's go out and hold the Ravens now to a similar output, and then we'll really be in a conversation.
And hopefully if that does happen, the offense can click, because how many weeks did we see that defense click, though, against lackluster competition being the Browns and the Giants? We didn't see that. We saw that defense play well, but we didn't see it mesh with the offense whatsoever. The offense was unable to put points on the board really the entirety of all those games, and that's why it really got so ugly against the Eagles, is that both sides played poorly at the same time. You can't have that happen if you're going to have that much volatility on defense. You have to have the offense be consistent and be consistently great to remain confident in these games. That's what I'm hoping for this week. I'm hoping for greatness from both sides of the ball. And if you win this game, Craig, can we get it back in, or are we not there yet? Oh, I think you're muted, Craig.
Yeah, like I said on Sunday, I think it's going to depend on how they win.
That's right,
I mean,
it does.
I think the fact of the matter is if the Bengals find a way and they go out and they win 41-24 over the Ravens, I may jump back in the pool a little bit more. I'll dip my toe in there. I don't know if I'm going to be doing a cannonball, but certainly going to be.
I will be
a little bit more excited. I know you will be. You might be, even if they win with a last-second field goal. But
100%.
I think the fact of the matter is that they had plenty of opportunities to get distracted this past weekend. They had the Ravens on a short week coming up. They had the Germaine Burton issue come up. They had a lot of reasons why they could have fallen flat this past weekend, and they didn't do that. And that's a really good sign of, quite frankly, a pretty well coached team. You know, we give Zach Taylor a lot of junk for his offensive play calling, and rightfully so. But as a team, they typically show up. And from that perspective, I think Zach Taylor's done a pretty good job over the course of his time here in Cincinnati. Now the question just comes is, can they beat the upper echelon? And if you expect to be a playoff team and expect to be a Super Bowl team, these are the types of wins that you have to find a way to make happen. And, you know, I'll let you know Thursday night around 11 o'clock whether or not I'm all in. But, you know me, it's gonna take something magical for me to get jumping all in cannonball.
I know, and I think we're all hoping for it, though. We're all hoping for it because I think this is the first 1 week window where that opportunity might present itself, because it is a divisional game. It is in Baltimore. It is on prime time. It's a playoff team that came into Cincinnati and beat you in what was probably the most frustrating loss of the season to date so far, in an overtime thriller in your own home stadium. Bengals unable to get the job done after a botched field goal hold, and if that goes a different way, you're tied with Baltimore right now for second in the AFC North, which is just crazy to think about after how this Bengals season has transpired so far. The Bengals are still right in the thick of it, but it comes down to this week in Baltimore on Thursday Night Football. It's a short week. You have 2 days rest. The Bengals certainly are not healthy, but there's no excuses because you've dug yourself in the hole where you don't have wiggle room. You have to win this football game in order to stay afloat, and you have to do it in a convincing fashion to get Craig back in, which is all I really want. That's all I want, is for Craig to get on here one day and say he's all the way back in. And I think we're going to get it at some point. And maybe it's the day that we finally break into the playoff bracket. But until then, I'll still be holding my breath. The one thing I did want to get your touch on, or your take on here before we wrapped it up today, was the Germaine Burton situation. Obviously, we talked about it on Sunday after the game, that he missed the walkthrough on Saturday, and that's why he was unable to play, or a healthy scratch, I should say, a coach's decision not to play on Sunday against the Raiders. But another chapter was added to the Germaine Burton story the following day. It was posted on Twitter that he was seen at the casino, gambling alone on the slots after being benched for sleeping in through warm-ups or through walkthrough before the game. I gave my piece on off the bench. I think benching the guy for missing walkthrough is A-okay, and something that should probably be done to uphold culture. The people calling for him to get cut because he went to the casino, I think, is a little crazy. But I'll let you say whatever you want to say about it.
I've got a lot of thoughts, including a hot take that I'll get to in just a minute.
I love hot takes.
So let's start here. Zach Taylor absolutely made the right move in terms of benching Germaine Burton. I don't think there's any sort of question about that. I think when you are a no-call, no-show to walk through the day before a game, there's no question in my mind that you're not playing on Sunday, especially given the previous issues that this Bengals team has already had, right? Like that part, no brainer. The whole casino thing, like, personally, I can't think of any better stress reliever than going to a casino and losing hundreds of dollars on a penny slot machine.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I love to do, especially by myself. I would never do such a crazy thing. Here's my hot take on the whole situation, and it kind of came up as we were going live today. So if you don't have a take on it yet, that's totally fine. I'm a little peeved at Jamar Chase today. Yep. And I
do agree.
Maybe I'm overreacting here, but for him to go today and talk about the fact that he was late to a meeting his rookie year. Fine. Like, use that as an example. Hey, look, you know, we have all made mistakes. I was late to a meeting my rookie year as well. It's part of the maturing process. I own that. I messed up. But to then go on and say, oh, I didn't apologize to the team. I went out and let the game speak and did 201 yards against the Ravens that week. Not a good look. Okay, so let's start there. Not a good look. And then when he was asked whether or not he had spoken to Germaine Burton about it afterwards, and he said that he hadn't, that's also not a good look. Like, and I think that one of the challenges that I have, and I realize that I don't know what's going on behind the scenes at all times in this Bengals organization. So I don't want to, overreact here, but I truly believe one of the things that is missing at times is that veteran leadership. And
I agree.
There was a lot of pressure put on Joe Burrow to try and be that leader. I don't know that it exists. And so when you're talking about a young guy who's trying to learn how to be a professional, to not have someone around him to be able to put their arm around Germaine Burton moment and say, look, you messed up. We all know you messed up. You did your time. You paid the price. Maybe you shouldn't have been dancing on the sideline during the game.
Yeah.
Maybe that was a bad look. Maybe you should stay out of the public eye for a couple of days. Going to the casino is probably a bad look. As a team, I 100% am on board with moving past mistakes, right?
For sure.
Like this isn't something that should linger for the rest of the year. But for Jamar Chase to come out today, and at least from what I saw, basically say that he didn't talk to Germaine Burton about this,
right? That
he also had to go through the same thing as a rookie. I just felt like that was a bad look. And I don't know, maybe I'm overreacting, but it just, like, in the wide receiver room, especially, there's no leader there. And when you're talking about T. Higgins, who's missing time over and over again and is in a contract dispute, you're talking about Jamar Chase, who's, late to a meeting and then, not putting his arms around Germaine Burton. I don't know. It just, like, yeah, it's great that was the last time you were ever late, Jamar, and that you had the best game of your career. But, like, this is a young kid who's had issues time and time again, and we're going to sit here and nonchalantly act like it didn't matter. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I didn't love, at least what I've read of it. Like, I'll go and watch the actual press conference here in a little bit because I haven't been able to watch the whole thing because we were going live. But, like, I don't love what I heard out of Jamar Chase today.
Yeah, I was listening to it a little bit before we were hopping on here. I didn't necessarily have a problem with the story of him being late his rookie year before the 201. I think that was kind of more or less just answering the questions that were asked to him. Where I did have the problem was I didn't talk to Germaine Burton, and I don't even know that I necessarily had a problem with Jamar not talking to Germaine Burton. My main problem was that his tone was, that's not my job. And if he didn't say that, he certainly projected it by the way he was talking and what he was, the vibe he was giving off when asked the questions about handling the Germaine Burton situation. It really seemed like he was puffing his chest out and saying, that's not my job. And I would like my number one wide receiver to think that is his job. I think that is something that I would really, really hope from the quote-unquote leader of that room, is to be a vocal leader and grab the young guy who clearly needs a little guidance and help him along in this transition to being a professional. It takes a lot to go from college to the pros. It's not the same. And I know he played at Georgia and Alabama, and everyone points to that and says, oh, those are championship programs. He should be ready to be in the pros. It's a big jump. I don't care where you come from to be in the pros. Jamar Chase said he never set an alarm to wake up early until he got to the Bengals. That's why he was late. And he played at LSU. That's no slouch of a program. I'm sure they had meetings and stuff along those lines. They certainly did. And he was obviously able to put up great numbers there. It's a big, big change when you get to the pros. And Germaine Burton needs help. And whether you're happy about that or not as a fan, that's the reality of the situation. This is a guy that can help this Bengals team win at some point this year or next or the year after. He's under contract here for a while. He's a rookie. So he has to figure it out. And I think the way he does that is with help from people in the organization, whether that's coaches or players. Certainly doesn't seem like it's going to be Jamar Chase, which is upsetting for me to see, because if you're going to put up 1,200, 1,400 yards a year and 15 touchdowns and be the best receiver in the NFL, that's awesome, and I love it, and I certainly won't turn my nose up at it. but I would like a little bit more. I would like that guy that's leading the stat sheet every week to also be leading the locker room and being encouraging to the young guys and helping them through hard times and even encouraging them when they do well. I assume it means a lot when Jamar Chase tells you did something well if you're an young NFL wide receiver. And for him to not even think to help Germaine Burton through this time when he clearly needs some guidance as a guy who is established in the league as one of the best receivers, that did make me feel some type of way. As you said, certainly not exactly what you want to hear from a guy who is supposed to be a leader of this team, or at least one of the best players, and you always hope your best players are the leaders.
Yeah, and again, part of the reason I want to go back and watch it is that you can get so much context from the way people say things and other things. So some of these quotes are hard to really know exactly what the context was. But like one of the ones that stood out to me was, Ben Baby put it out there. He said that Jamar said, quote, "He's a grown man. I've had a conversation with him. He knows right from wrong. So I'm not going to constantly keep telling you something. I don't expect you to do that to me." Like, ultimately, and this goes back to our conversation on Sunday when we talked about the Bengals organizational history of being unable to turn people into professionals. Like, that's great that you had conversations with him in the past.
Right.
And that you think that he knows right from wrong and that he knows that he messed up. Like, all of that is fine and dandy. But now what? It's the same conversation we have in like professional life and other things. Like, okay, you know that something went wrong. You know that something got messed up. What are we doing to fix it?
Right.
And to me, it just feels like the Bengals aren't doing anything to fix the issue. They just hope that it'll fix it themselves. And I realize that this guy's getting paid $1 million a year to fix it himself. But like,
that's your investment too.
Correct.
You should care about how it happens.
And if you think that you're a Super Bowl contender, like, wouldn't you want to like go out of your way to do everything you can to make sure that the guys on the team are in fact putting forth their best effort to become a Super Bowl contender? Like, I don't know. It just feels like over and over again, I get these comments from Jamar Chase that don't make me feel like he's a leader in any sort of way. And I go back to I'm trying to pull it up. I think it was back on Halloween where Jamar Chase made a comment about Germaine Burton basically not knowing the playbook.
Right.
And he said something along the lines of when he knows what he's doing 100% with confidence and other routes, he'll be even more of a game changer. Like, you're whether you like it or not, you and T. Higgins are the leaders of that wide receiver room. You were a number 1 draft pick. You are a top 5 wide receiver in this league without a question. At some point, there's got to be a little bit of maturing from Jamar Chase too, to be able to say to this kid, "Hey, I got you. We're going to get through this together." Like,
that's what you'd like to see.
You can't just accept the fact that someone is immature and that it's going to take time for them to get better. Like, you don't have time for that. You're losing T. Higgins next year, most likely.
Right. No, 100%. You're supposed Germaine Burton, if he wasn't going to be the wide receiver 2 next year, was at least supposed to be the wide receiver 3 when T. Higgins leaves and be able to contribute to this offense at a decently high level. And at this point, now 9 weeks into the NFL season, his rookie year, we know nothing. He's been inactive for multiple games. I mean, we have not learned a single thing other than that he's not mentally ready to be a professional. We don't know anything between the white lines, which is incredibly frustrating for a 3rd-round pick, as it continues to feel like the Bengals waste these mid-round picks. And whether it's, if you're going to draft a guy with noted character concerns, you have to have a plan in place for how you're going to get him into the system and into the organization and into the culture that you have built here, because obviously there's a disconnect. He played at 2 great programs, had the same issues at both Georgia and Alabama. There's a disconnect with him when it comes to winning. That's not all he cares about. There's something else going on where he's also sleeping in. I'm sure that happened at these colleges as well. And the Bengals need to take it on themselves a little bit to say, we took this guy in the third round knowing there was a problem and we're going to have to fix it. Because obviously Germaine Burton's not going to fix it himself, or he would have by now. Maybe a coach's decision healthy scratch is going to be the thing that has him turn it around. Maybe getting thrown out under the bus in public is all he needed in order to turn it around and focus. Maybe. I don't know. But I'm not exactly fully convinced that Germaine Burton's going to be a completely buttoned up professional for the rest of his career. And I think a lot of that comes back to what I've heard from a bunch of different players now, and it doesn't seem like anyone is willing to help. It's a lot of frustration, which is absolutely warranted, but be frustrated while helping a really talented young guy try to figure it out in the professionals. I think there's a way to do both, and it is upsetting that it doesn't seem like anyone is willing to be that guy for Burton. I do think it's a little bit interesting that we are spending so much time, not just us, but every Bengals fan and national media and everything along those lines, spending so much time on the Bengals' third wide receiver. I know T. Higgins is out, but this is the third round pick, the 80th pick in the draft. I don't know how many other 80th overall picks are having this much conversation about them not being able to get on the field. It's certainly interesting, and a product of Joe Burrow and the conversation that surrounded him his entire career, and how he's a product of his weapons. And when Tyler Boyd was here with Jamar and T, that was certainly something that was talked about a lot from the people outside of Cincinnati that tried to downgrade Joe Burrow. And now, without those elite weapons, Joe Burrow's still putting up great numbers, and I think people want to find that next elite weapon to try to detract from Joe Burrow, and a lot of people thought it was going to be Germaine Burton. A lot of Bengals fans were obviously really excited about Germaine Burton as well. How many people said he was a first-round talent that we got in the third round? I still, to a degree, believe that is true. We've seen the talent show its flashes on the field. He's a really exciting player. He just can't figure it out. And a 2-round fall, that starts to make sense if a guy's sleeping through meetings. So maybe that's exactly what you signed up for when you drafted Burton. I'm hoping he can figure it out and be that guy to be the number 3 behind T. Higgins and Jamar Chase as we get healthy, as we come down the stretch here. He can be a difference maker in this team, because I still firmly believe that he can make the biggest difference out of anyone that could be thrust into that third wide receiver role now that the trade deadline has passed and no additions were made at that position. I think I've seen enough of Yoshivas. I certainly have seen enough of Charlie Jones and Trenton Irwin. I think Germaine Burton gives you the best chance to win, but he has to want to help you to win. Hopefully that changes after this week. Hopefully he's a big-time difference maker this week against the Ravens. That would certainly be nice. Hopefully he has a big-time touchdown catch against the Ravens. That would feel good.
Yeah, I'm going back and reading a article from the New York Times back in April when the Bengals drafted Germaine Burton, and it's talking about how, this is a surprising shift for the Bengals to take a player like Germaine Burton, who had character issues after Zach Taylor had spent so much time the first 4 years trying to basically fix a culture that had allowed a lot of off the field issues. And, it started by taking Amarius Mims, who didn't necessarily have off the field issues, but certainly a lack of playing time. And it was kind of the first time that the Bengals really kind of reached a little bit, I guess. And then taking Germaine Burton, there was a quote in the article. It says, quote, "He picked up a reputation as an undisciplined player. NFL scouts said that he had up and down moments with the coaching staffs at both Georgia and Alabama." And then obviously most notably, Burton had an incident where he struck a female Tennessee fan during a post-game field storming celebration. No charges were ever filed. Burton said it was something that I had to move past. It was a very emotional, passionate game. I was on the line throughout the season, and I moved on from that and learned from situations like that. We played LSU 2 weeks later, and the same thing happened. And I was the first one back in the locker room to clearly separate myself and understand what was at stake. Zach Taylor talked about it during this article and in his press conference afterwards about how he had conversations with Germaine Burton about that Tennessee incident and about the other reports. And the other piece of it that comes into play here is that this is a kid who has been trained by TJ Houshmandzadeh for a number of years now, a guy obviously the Bengals are very familiar with and have a very good relationship with. So maybe he doesn't need a Jamar Chase to step in and be the leader, but maybe that's TJ Houshmandzadeh who's helping him get to the next level. Whatever it may be, the Bengals can't afford for Germaine Burton to continue to be a distraction for the rest of this year and into next year. That can't happen, especially in a situation where you're hoping that he can step in and be your number 2 wide receiver. Right. It just can't happen. So long story short is that you hope that he did in fact learn from it. Would have been nice to hear a little bit more from Germaine Burton today. He did talk with reporters at one point, it sounded like, and quite frankly was not exactly very transparent in his responses. The full transcript of his conversation with reporters today. Reporters asked, "Do you feel like you let yourself down and your teammates down at all?" Burton said, quote, "Yeah, for sure." Reporters asked, "What did you say to your teammates and what did teammates say to you?" And Burton said, quote, "Just got to be better." Reporters asked, "What happened on Saturday?" Burton said, quote, "Just got to be better." Reporters asked, "What do you think you can do to overcome this and not have it happen again?" And Burton said, "Just got to be better." Reporters asked, Where is your mindset at? And Burton said, quote, "Just got to be better."
Could have guessed.
And it just, like, I don't know what you expect him to say, if we're being honest, but at the same time, like, he's got to own it a little bit more, I think. And say, look, we're moving past it. We own what happened and recognize that I messed up, and it's not going to happen again. But just to sit here and say, yeah, just got to be better, I don't know. It's not going to win over a fan base for sure, let alone a locker room. And I realize that there's probably other conversations happening behind closed doors that we're not privy to. So, Germaine Burton owes us as fans and the reporters nothing. I want to acknowledge that. But for a fan base who wants to believe in him, he certainly didn't help himself today.
Not one bit. Not one bit, and the Bengals certainly don't need any extra added distractions or pressure as they move forward, because we know how important every single game is here on out. We've talked about it for weeks now. Every single one virtually a must-win for the Bengals as we progress through the rest of this season. The Bengals just beat the Raiders at home. Now they move on to the Ravens in Baltimore, and then after that game, to the Chargers in LA, which was actually flexed to Sunday Night Football. So now 6 primetime games for the Bengals this season. Joe Burrow versus Justin Herbert, a matchup of 2 quarterbacks from the same draft class, 2 of the better quarterbacks in all of football. Certainly should be an exciting one on Sunday Night Football. We'll have Chatterbox Bengals for you, as always. Kick to finale of that one. But before we get there, obviously the Ravens coming up this week. Doesn't get much bigger than this divisional matchup. Have to win them both going into the bye. Certainly would be feeling good coming off 2 primetime wins going into the bye. A fun fact about that Chargers game, not to overlook the Ravens, not that I am at all, but something I saw that popped up today. We talked about it briefly on Off the Bench. Joe Burrow has played the Chargers, it feels like, plenty. And Justin Herbert has played the Bengals, it feels like, plenty. Justin Herbert's 1-0 against Joe Burrow. They've only played each other one time. And Justin Herbert won here in Cincinnati. They've both been banged up for almost the entirety of their careers since being drafted. But when they are out there, 2 of the best quarterbacks in all of football. As of now, still a lot of time till then, but as of now, both are healthy. So assuming the Bengals can get the win this Thursday night, that is going to be a monumental Sunday Night Football game against the Chargers going into the bye. Craig, we'll see you after the game on Thursday night for Chatterbox post-game, hopefully a Bengals win. But since we won't talk before then, I want to get a prediction out of you before this one. It's a primetime game. It's a big one. I want to know how you're feeling. Bengals are underdogs, big-time underdogs in Baltimore. +6 is the line for the Bengals. The total is at 52.5. You can pick one. You can pick them both. If you want to cop out and just take the over, that's fine with me. But the Bengals are +6. How are you feeling?
Well, I'm definitely taking the over. I don't think that one's even a question. Now, you know me, I love my primetime unders, but 56 for a Bengals-Ravens game. I think I'm taking the over there. Look, the Bengals and Ravens, every game they play is tight. Whether the Bengals come out with a win or not, I'm not 100% sure. I think 6.5 points is way too many, though. So I'm going to take the Bengals to cover. I'm going to take the over. Beyond that, we'll see how Thursday night goes. There
we go. And right afterwards, we'll be here to break it all down. But before then, leading up to Thursday Night Football, where I'll take it away at kickoff for a whole live game stream as usual. Elliot Rearing and crew will be at Champions live on Thursday for a little pre-game action leading up to the Bengals-Ravens Thursday Night game. Champions Grill on Work Road out on the west side of Cincinnati. Beautiful place that is nice enough to let us do our live shows there every other Thursday. Sadly, I will not be in attendance this week because I got to hold down the fort for that game stream here in the basement. But those guys will still be giving you a great live show on Thursday leading up to the game, and then I'll take it from there. And Craig will join me right after for a post game. So Thursday is going to be a busy, busy day for Chatterbox Bengals on all the Chatterbox platforms, YouTube and Twitter. So certainly should be fun. Make sure you turn in to any and all of it. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. Wish we had a little bit more to go over on the trade deadline special. Obviously, the Bengals make their third move in franchise history in season trade for Khalil Herbert, running back from the Bears. They send a 7th-round pick to the Bears in exchange for Herbert, the first and only move the Bengals made today. So we thank you guys for tuning in. This is the trade deadline special, if you can even call it that. One move for the Bengals, Raiders recap, and a little Ravens preview. Got it all for you guys today. Thanks everyone for watching. Hoo day, and we'll catch you next time.